Americans are and have been muffin crazy. Muffins are essentially individually sized Quickbreads. And this recipe for giant Bran and raisin muffins is brimming with healthful ingredients, including giant raisins, wheat bran, prune juice, molasses, and yogurt, no sugar. We start with 2 eggs. These were laid yesterday in my hen house, and those hens are laying like crazy right now. To the eggs, which I just broke up with a fork, 1 cup of prune juice. Prune juice is full of antioxidants. It has a natural sweetness. Now also we're adding something that's high in calcium and also high in iron, unsulfured molasses, 6 tablespoons. And a little secret, if you're measuring or any sticky liquid, spray a little vegetable spray in your measuring cup and it slides out pretty cleanly. And 6 tablespoons of melted butter, slightly cooled. You don't want it boiling hot when you put it into this mixture. And 1 cup of non-fat yogurt, unflavored, no fat. So there's our yogurt. And to this, add 2 cups of wheat bran. Wheat bran is bran that has not been processed. It still has the outer coating of the wheat attached. And this all together with the raisins, it's going to sit for 10 minutes because you want that wheat bran to plump. We want 3/4 of a cup of golden raisins. Now look at the size of these raisins. These are the most gorgeous raisins and they are so tasty. And 3/4 of a cup dark raisins. 30% of the grape crop in America goes to the raisin industry. It's what your kids love. And now don't forget 1 teaspoon of best quality vanilla extract. Now let this sit for 10 minutes, let it all plump up. And while it sits, you can sift your dry ingredients. We have 2 cups of all-purpose flour. And I like to just dip it in and level it off. 2 cups. And for sifting, I just use a wire whisk. So that's 1 teaspoon of salt and 2 teaspoons of baking powder and 1 teaspoon of baking soda. After 10 minutes, you can mix the dry ingredients into the bran mixture. Everything's well incorporated. The raisins are a little softer. The bran is certainly a little plumper. So now add your dry ingredients into this larger bowl. A little bit at a time. Stir it in. You don't want to overwork it. I like baking by hand every now and then. It's kind of pleasurable to be in the old-fashioned mode of stirring by hand. So there, ready to put into our muffin tins. This recipe is designed to make 6 1-cup muffins. Now I'm using a 1/2 cup scoop. We're going to have to scoop it more than once to fill the papers. But all of this should fit into these 6 papers. And using an ice cream scoop like this really helps a lot. Look how neat. This is a much neater way of forming muffins, cookies, biscuits. So pop these right into a 375-degree preheated oven, right on the center rack, and bake 27 to 30 minutes. So once these come out of the oven, cool them on a rack. And I like to put them in a basket like this. You break this open. Look how full of goodness, full of beautiful raisins. And have some softened, unsalted butter and enjoy. On one of my several visits to Jackson, Mississippi, I tasted a little tiny muffin with country ham that was so delicious. And I kind of wrested that recipe from my friend, and this is the result. Tiny orange muffins flavored with orange zest and raisins. So you need 1 stick of butter, 8 tablespoons, creamed with 1 cup of granulated sugar. This can be done right in the stand mixer, to which we'll add 2 eggs and 1 cup of buttermilk with 1 teaspoon of baking soda. And let that just sit. Some dry ingredients. We need 2 cups of all-purpose flour and 1/2 teaspoon of salt, sifted. And so that's your dry ingredients. It's a very, very simple recipe, but a very tasty recipe. And the coarse salt, if it doesn't go through, just break it up. Now the raisins, we have 1 cup of raisins ground up with the zest of 1 orange. And the best way I find to zest an orange is with one of these. This one is a great one because it's bent up. You can see how it's bent up, and it holds the zest neatly as you zest. And this makes 30 little muffins, 2 tablespoon muffins. Now this gets really finely ground up. So add your eggs. Nice large egg. Now if you're using buttermilk as our liquid, if you don't find your own buttermilk, you can make your own by taking whole milk and add 1 tablespoon of white vinegar or lemon juice to 1 cup of the milk. So now add your flour mixture alternately with the buttermilk. The buttermilk has kind of puffed up with the baking soda. And you don't want to overmix this, so do this quickly. So now, time to add your beautiful raisins. And I remember being served these at Dero Puckett's house. She's an old friend of mine from Mississippi, and she was always my hostess when I went to Jackson. We had such a good time. Okay, so this is all done. It is ready to put into the muffin tins. I've already buttered the tins, and I find that this is by far the easiest way. Soften butter, room temperature, with a brush like this, just to go around and make sure you get every little nook and cranny. And you know what? Do this too if you want. Just go across the tops so that if a little bit rises on top, it's going to be released. Okay, so scoop. 1 scoop per. Now you could make this also in little cupcake papers, but they're so small and you don't want to be peeling paper off when you want to just slice them in half and put a piece of homemade smoked turkey inside with a little bit of quince jelly or red currant jelly. What a delicious thing at Thanksgiving. Little empty indentations fill with just a little bit of water, and that way all your muffins will rise at the same rate. And these go right into a 400-degree preheated oven. Bake for approximately 12 minutes. Now when these come out of the oven, while they're still warm, brush the tops of each muffin with orange juice. Adds just another little piquant taste to the muffin. Now, while these are still moist, just sprinkle with a tiny bit of granulated sugar. And you'll need just a little bit of sugar. If you're not in the mood for this little tiny bit of extra sugar, you can forget it, but it really gives a little crunch to the top. And these can just be arranged in whatever manner on these stacked pedestals. I think these look utterly delicious, and I know that you will find them utterly delicious. Enjoy. This next recipe is the healthy morning muffins. It's an unusual take on the famous Morning Glory muffins. That recipe became one of 15 most popular recipes from Gourmet magazine. So we're going to start with the dry ingredients. 2.5 cups of flour, 1 teaspoon of salt, 1 teaspoon of baking powder. I'm going to sift right here in this bowl, and 1 teaspoon of baking soda. And at this time you can add your nutmeg, freshly grated nutmeg. And we need 1 teaspoon. So much better to grate your own nutmeg. It's one of those fantastic spices that really adds a depth of flavor to anything that it's used in. And nutmeg is really 2 spices in one. It's covered with a little orange web when you find it. That's mace. And you take the mace off and grind that. And you then are left with the nutmeg itself, and you grind that. So here we have very flavorful nutmeg. And to this, add 1 3/4 cups of rolled oats. Don't use instant oats. It's the rolled oats that you want. These will hold their shape and taste crunchy in the final muffin. Stir these in and then add 1 cup of dark brown sugar. Dark brown sugar dries out really fast, so use it immediately. To reconstitute brown sugars, light or dark, you can put the sugar in a plastic bag and put like a half of an apple in the bag. The moisture from the apple will actually re-moisturize the brown sugar. It works like magic. So there, we have this done. And now add 1 cup of plump raisins. I love these golden raisins. The reason I'm using them today is because look at the size, look at the color, and they're moist. If the raisins you have are dry, you can mix them with a little bit of boiling water to plump them up. You could even use orange juice, which I prefer. So there. We have to grate the carrots. We need 3 cups of grated carrot. Peel your carrot first and then grate. And I think we have 3 cups here. Yes. We need 2 eggs, 2/3 cup of skim milk, and this you can just add to your eggs. 6 tablespoons of really good olive oil. Instead of butter in the batter, olive oil. Olive oil keeps these muffins really moist and very flavorful. So 6 tablespoons olive oil. So now add your carrot. If you don't have carrot, you could add zucchini. So now add bananas. Bananas are really nice in a muffin like this, and kids love them. Now notice I'm using freckled bananas. Don't use bananas that are totally black. They are fermented and they will taste fermented in your muffin. A lot of people think that you have to have them black to be ripe. So you can squish them with an old-fashioned potato masher like this. Or you can use a fork. And you want some lumps. Don't get it totally lumpless. Very tasty. So mix this up and then add your wet ingredients. And here you go. And stir this up with either a wooden spoon or a rubber scraper. And keep stirring, keep mixing until it's all incorporated. Okay, so this is nicely mixed. Time to fill the muffin papers. Now this is another way to bake muffins without a muffin tin. I love these papers. They're really charming and they look very professional when you serve the muffins in a container like this. I'm using a 1/2 cup ice cream scoop so that I don't make a mess. So fill each one with a 1/2 cup first, and then you'll go back and use up the rest of the batter. This recipe makes 10 of these. Now at this point you should preheat your oven. It should be preheated already, by the way, at 400 degrees. And these muffins, because they're so hearty and have so many ingredients, will take about 25 minutes to bake. Now sprinkle a little bit of old-fashioned oats. This is a 1/4 cup, and I'll just sprinkle the tops. These will adhere to the batter nicely during baking and look pretty. Okay, 400 degrees, approximately 25 minutes. Set your timer. This is a very nice way to kickstart your day. Just peel off the paper and look what emerges. A really, really pretty muffin. Hefty, healthy, tasty, great for you and your family. So here's another really delicious muffin, fruit-filled coffee cake muffins, topped with a sprinkling of cinnamon and sugar. These muffins are hard to resist. I chose a nice, firm, ripe Santa Rosa plum. They're kind of sour sweet with a red skin, and just cut it up, 3 plums, we'll save those. And right in the bowl here, your dry ingredients, 2 cups of all-purpose flour. And if you store your flour in a glass container like this, it's very easy to dip in and measure. 3/4 of a cup of granulated sugar, 1/2 teaspoon of salt, a half a teaspoon of cinnamon, and 1 tablespoon of baking powder. And sift this with your wire whisk. Very easy. And oh, just a large pinch of freshly grated nutmeg. That's a large pinch. And now into this bowl, 2 eggs. I need large eggs. And you can whisk these with 3/4 of a cup of milk and 1 teaspoon of vanilla. And a half a cup of melted butter, melted and cooled. And always keep your ingredients at room temperature. Hot butter into icy cold flour, it will lump, and you won't be happy with the result. Okay, so this is your batter. Now you can add the wet to the dry. Just stir it in. This makes a nice cakey batter. So it stirs very nicely. It does not have to be particularly smooth. And this is about 2 tablespoons of batter into our papers. Papers are very handy because you don't have to butter, you don't have to spray. It doesn't add any additional calories to your muffin. And there's very little cleanup. So now, plums. You can use a spoon or your fingers to drop plums right into each of the 12 papers. It calls for 3 plums chopped. And now use up the rest of the batter. Now your oven should be preheating at this point at 375 degrees. And the muffins will cook for about 15 to 17 minutes. So now in a little bowl, just put 2 tablespoons of sugar and 1/4 of a teaspoon of cinnamon. And just sprinkle the top. Cinnamon goes very nicely with plums. And this is going to be your little plum coffee cake. Very nice for a brunch, really, really nice with a cappuccino for breakfast, or just as a special after-school treat. So pop those into your 375-degree oven. Set your timer for 16 minutes. So once these are cooled, you can remove them from the muffin tin, and they really do look pretty. I think these are beautiful looking muffins. This one is never going to get to my table because I am going to show you what it looks like when you peel the paper off and break this in half. What a lovely muffin full of delicious fruit. And this plum coffee cake is sure to become one of your favorite muffins ever. Enjoy. This is a delicious muffin that if you do happen to have a couple extra zucchinis, you can't beat this recipe. Drizzled with a zesty orange glaze and a delicate sprig of chervil, these muffins are perfect for breakfast. You need 1 pound of zucchini, and just use your box grater and grate the zucchini. There, that's good. Now, zucchini is a wet vegetable, and you want to try to get as much moisture out of this zucchini as possible. So what I'm going to do is just put it all into a cloth, and we'll just let that sit for a second until the juices start to run, and then squeeze. And while we're waiting for that, you can start the rest of the muffin. Melted butter, 3/4 of a cup, and 3 large eggs, and 1½ cups of granulated sugar. And this is another muffin that's easily made by hand without an electric mixer. You can just make it in a bowl. Stir well until incorporated. And to this, add the zest of 1 bright orange. And you just want the outside bright skin of the orange when you're zesting. And squeeze the juice too. And we just need a tablespoon, so just sort of eyeball it. So those are our wet ingredients. Simple, fragrant, really fragrant. It just smells delicious. Now for our dry ingredients. 2½ cups of unbleached all-purpose white flour. 2½ teaspoons of baking powder. You might say, oh, why so much? Well, you remember we're having zucchini. It's sort of a heavy addition to the batter. That's why you need a little bit more leavening. And some other interesting ingredients. 1/4 teaspoon of anise seed, 1/4 teaspoon of ground cinnamon, ground cardamom from cardamom seed pods. Mix these together. So we now have our dry ingredients. Now we have to squeeze our zucchini. Now watch this, just twist the cloth. I remember doing this as a child for my mother when we made cabbage pierogi. We would squeeze the steamed cabbage and get all the moisture out of it. So that's enough, I think. Now this can go right into your wet ingredients. This same recipe actually can be adapted to other kinds of squash. You can also use carrot. And now add your dry ingredients. Makes a nice batter. And if you notice, the muffins that we're making on this show all have a little bit of a twist. A topping, a sprinkling, a spice makes a much more interesting muffin. So these are now ready to spoon into our papers. Just pieces of parchment paper folded like a tulip cup. So use a 1/2 cup ice cream scoop and gently drop the batter down into the paper. And this should make 10 muffins. Make sure your oven is preheated, 325 degrees, and bake for about 25 minutes. This zucchini muffin has a sugar glaze made out of powdered sugar, orange juice, and orange zest. And you'll want about a tablespoon of glaze on top of each of these beautiful muffins. And I also like to garnish with a little piece of chervil. This is a great late summer muffin when you have way too much zucchini in your garden and don't know what to do with it. Zucchini is the secret ingredient for keeping these muffins very moist. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you on the next episode of Martha Bakes. Combine 6 tablespoons of unsalted butter and 1/4 cup of light brown sugar. Beat with a hand mixer until light and fluffy. Add 1 cup of flour and 1/2 teaspoon of coarse salt. Use your hands to mix until large crumbs form. Sprinkle a generous tablespoon of the crumbs over your favorite muffin batter and bake.